Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the Manila International Airport Authority says contingency measures are in place ahead of the scheduled 6-hour shutdown of Philippine airspace on May 17. MIAA gets an officer in charge following the Ombudsman's order to suspend the airport's chief. MIAA OIC Bryan Co joins us live. And later, the country's COVID-19 cases still on an upward trend, but the Interagency Task Force on COVID-19 isn't keen on bringing back the face mask mandate. Octa Research Fellow Guido David tells us more later in the program. Over 100 flights are seen to be disrupted when the country's airspace shuts down for 6 hours beginning midnight of May 17th. Airport authorities say contingencies are in place even for unadvised passengers. The airspace will be closed for maintenance activities to avoid a repeat of the New Year's Day glitch that affected thousands of passengers. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have MIAA Officer in Charge, Bryan Co. Bryan, thank you so much for your time. Welcome back to the source.
Good morning, Ma'am Pinky, and thank you again for inviting the MIAA to your program.
Congratulations, sir, OIC.
Thank you, ma'am, for, of course, this is a bigger role to fill, but it's an interim case until the GM comes back for work.
I understand because Secretary Bautista was saying they plan to appeal this preventive suspension on GM Chong.
Yes, correct, ma'am. The legal team of GM Chong is planning for this, and of course, they will plan for an appeal so that it can be lifted so they can return to work.
I'm just interested to find out when these reassignments were made of over 200 personnel by GM Chong. Were you there already at the time as well?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, the reassignment is part of management prerogative, and it's been done even by previous administrations in MIAA. This has been done and is practiced in other government agencies as well, as long as you comply with the civil service requirements and all the rules that you have as far as personal reassignment is concerned.
Hence the question, if he complied with the civil service requirements, the question begs why the Ombudsman suspended him for 6 months without pay together with another individual. So I know that even Secretary Bautista was saying they were they were surprised by this. They didn't even know that there was an anonymous group that filed a case against, a complaint rather, against GM Chong.
Yeah. In fact, we were all caught unaware. There were no, usually there are preliminary inquiries that are supposed to be sent to the office of the GM and to the other affected officer. But in this case, there were no preliminary information that was asked of them to respond to this anonymous complaint. And that's one of the points that they will raise as part of asking for a temporary relief so that they can return to work.
In other words, they weren't told, they weren't given the opportunity to respond.
That is correct. The first time the GM knew about this allegation is the time that he got word that he is being served a temporary suspension order.
Okay, so let's see what happens. As you mentioned a while ago, the legal team is readying the appeal on this preventive suspension on GM Chong.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about May 17, that airspace shutdown that will happen 12 midnight to 6 a.m. It was already reported that about 130 flights and more or less 20,000 passengers will be affected. This was yesterday. Is this still an accurate number?
Yes, ma'am. The 130 flights that will be affected on May 17th between 12 midnight until 6 o'clock is based on the scheduled flight operations for that period. This has been determined already by our operations team, and we are in coordination with the airlines on how we can react to this. But we would like to note that these are all the flights that are affected in Manila alone, because this is an airspace shutdown. Therefore, there are other flights also affected in Cebu, Clark, and other airports. So, so as far as MIA is concerned, we're looking at 130 flights. The 20,000 passengers are based on a projection of a high load factor. So the sooner the airlines are able to implement their changes, or if they stop selling these flights, it will be less than 20,000 passengers that will be affected that day. Because as you know, for domestic flights, the bookings tend to be near the departure date, and not like international flights that passengers do tend to plan ahead with months ahead booking.
I actually heard you say that yesterday when the reporters were asking, in essence, percentage-wise, how many domestic and how many international flights will be affected. And you said more than 50% of that would be domestic, and the balance would be the international flights, to which you had mentioned that kapag domestic kasi, the tendency you said is that we actually book closer to the date as compared to or vis-a-vis an international flight. So you were saying that, I hope I got it right, that because these domestic flights, they can actually be combined, because for the most part you were saying that there's a lot of late purchases of these domestic flights.
Yes, ma'am. Based on, of course, consumer patterns, domestic flights or domestic purchase of domestic tickets tend to be near the departure date compared to international travel, where they have to plan ahead. But in this case, yes, it's possible for the airlines to close the sales for the affected flights in the early morning. Domestic flights usually depart out of Manila between 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock as part of their first wave of domestic flights going to the provincial stations. And by already closing for sale those flights in the early morning, they can actually consolidate these flights with their next flights departing Manila, between 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning.
How many airlines will be affected?
In this case, there will be more than 20 carriers that will be affected, because the airspace shutdown will be from midnight until 6 o'clock, and we will still have a number of international carriers that will also be affected, because at nighttime there will be those departing for Korea, the Middle East, and the other destinations that would have to retime their flights a bit earlier so that they can depart or arrive Manila before the airspace shutdown on midnight. And in the early morning, the Philippine Airlines flights from the US usually arrives around 4:30, 5:30. They will have to be, they will arrive by the time that the airspace opens.
Sir Brian, sorry to clarify, did you say, when I asked how many airlines will be affected, did you say 20?
Around 20.
Around 20, okay. So, and then, when do the airlines have to submit their plans, complete plans for the affected passengers?
Basically, they were given time to complete their plans, and since last week that the NOTAM, or the Notice to Airmen, was issued by the CAAP, so that the airlines and the airports can plan for the impact of this scheduled airspace shutdown. They will be submitting. We will be having another meeting for the Manila-based carriers on Monday next week, so that we can review all of the plans that they implemented. But that doesn't mean they will be implementing these plans after we review it. So as we speak right now, several airlines have already published retiming, and of course, Philippine Airlines, Cebu Pacific, AirAsia Philippines will be the most impacted, and the earlier that they reschedule and advise their passengers, the less disruption we can expect in the airports on the 17th.
Have they indicated their biggest concern regarding this?
Yes, yesterday in our coordination meeting with the airlines and the CAAP, they have voiced some questions. It's more of the technical details about the outage, on how they can react accordingly. What's the last flight that they can dispatch out of Manila? What time would be the earliest flight that would come in? So what are the contingencies in place if ever? Of course, we have to plan for all eventualities, but the CAAP is assuring us, of course, that the airspace will be open by 6 o'clock. But as part of our duty, we have to plan for everything. So
Right.
we're looking also at a possible extension.
Yeah.
So, but that's very unlikely to ask.
That's right, no, Sir Brian, because while it is, the plan is 12 to 6 a.m., there could be an extension. So that would have been the concern of the airlines in the event that there's an extension, because they're planning it, retiming it after 6 a.m.
Yes.
Okay.
You are correct that while we're planning for 6 a.m., of course, as part of our duty, we have to plan for every possible scenario.
Okay, but there was another shutdown yesterday, I think May 3, from 2 to 4 a.m. And then you were actually saying that they finished the maintenance 3 minutes earlier. I'll go to that a little later on. Let's talk about this May 17. I want to stick to this so there's no confusion. My understanding here is that this is going to be done to upgrade the air traffic management system, repair the voltage regulator, and replace the uninterruptible power supply. Are these all three things going to be done during the 6-hour shutdown?
Ma'am Pinky, actually yesterday shutdown, actually it's not a shutdown. There was a no time yesterday that between 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock where the CAP advised that they will be changing some of their systems. The AVR was already successfully replaced yesterday without any impact to operations apart from the planned preemptive changes that Philippine Airlines made to their flights. But other than that, it was a very smooth installation of the AVR or the voltage regulator of CAAP. For May 17, the major equipment that they will be changing and upgrading would be the UPS system. Both of these systems were affected. If you remember, there was a January 1 shutdown of our airspace. So these are the needed upgrades to address that problem.
To summarize, yesterday what was done was to change the voltage regulator. And then for May 17, from 12 to 6 a.m., this is to replace the uninterruptible power supply. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is correct.
Anything else aside from the uninterruptible power supply? Any other equipment that needs to be repaired on May 17?
The CAAP would know most
Okay.
details, but as they advise, it will be the AVR and the UPS. It would take, of course, more time for the UPS when they shut down because they would have to reboot the different systems that are connected to that power source.
And after this, could there be another airspace shutdown, or will these 2 days be sufficient to fix everything that needs to be repaired or changed?
Based on the statement of the CAAP, that after this, they are very confident that the air traffic system in the Philippines will be more reliable and, of course, less susceptible to possible outages. So I think we are very much looking forward to this. As an airport operator, of course, the premier gateway country, we need this type of reliability so that we can have public confidence in the air transport system.
And these are being done because of what happened during January 1. But January 1, I hope you can help me here, is that there was a problem with the air traffic system because of a power outage. I'm just trying, I know it's more technical than that, but yung punot dulo ho ba nung January 1 was a power problem that affected our air traffic system?
Yes, you are correct. It was a power problem, and the affected power systems are the AVR and the UPS. That's why
Okay.
they're being replaced and upgraded.
So January 1 basically was a power problem. And May 1 seems to be also a power problem. Let's talk about that after the break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb, our source today, MIAA Officer in Charge, Bryan Co. Sir Bryan, so it was a power interruption in January 1. It's also a power interruption last May 1. So I just want to find out, what was the difference between the power problem in January 1 to the power problem last May 1?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing us to clarify. These are two different facilities. They're not located in the same place. Actually, the CAAP facility in January 1 this year is separate from MIAA or MIAA. It's being managed by the CAAP, and it's outside of the perimeter of the airport. While the outage in May 1, this Monday, early morning, was a facility in the AIA Terminal 3 that affected the operations of T3, while the other terminals were not affected.
Got it. The problem was kuryente sa kaap. Tama ba? Tatagalugin ko. Tapos yung pangalawa po, yung May 1, nagkaroon ng problema doon sa NAIA Terminal 3. Kuryente sa NAIA
Tama
Terminal
po.
3.
January 1 po, it was the kaap na system that got affected, yung kuryente nila doon sa kanilang CNS ATM.
Yeah.
While ito pong Monday, May 1, it was NAIA's facility.
But, Sir Bryan, the cause, the origin, really is about electricity. There was a meeting supposed to be regarding the May 1 problem. Various agencies, it's an interagency meeting. What was discussed? And is there any preliminary finding? This one, on the May 1 power interruption?
Yes, ma'am. 2 days ago, there was already an interagency meeting that was chaired by the DOTR. So we have members, of course, of the MIAA engineering team. Meralco was also there because they're supplying power to our terminals. Of course, we also tap third-party subject matter experts from the IIEE or the Institute of Electrical Engineers, so that we can have an objective assessment of what happened. Apart from that, there were also members of the NICA and other law enforcement agencies who joined, so that we can have a two-directional approach in this. We look at the technical side as well as looking at the other sides or the other angles, because as mentioned by the Secretary, we're not closing any possible angles as to what caused the outage.
Yeah.
But there are areas right now that are being investigated where we think the fault might have originated. So as we speak, the investigators are going around our facilities, interviewing people, looking at the CCTV and maintenance log, so that by next week they can give us a preliminary data
Finding.
on what happened last May 1.
Yeah, but you were saying that you have already an idea on where the problem was?
We have a theory. We were already able to zoom in certain areas because the NAIA Terminal 3 is a very big complex with over 7 substations. So we already have some areas which we think, it's not yet assured until there's a full technical study. But we are zooming in on these areas which could possibly be the origin of the fault.
Was it intentional or not?
For now, there are no indications as of yet. But of course, as we mentioned, the NICA and the other law enforcement agencies will be looking into that angle.
Yeah, because Secretary Bautista was saying they're not discounting the possibility of a sabotage. But I guess I just want to follow up on this. When we talk about, or when you talk about sabotage, sabotage by who or by what?
Well, that matter, ma'am, I think we still don't have an idea if ever that's the motive, but I think that's why we're getting the experts in that field, such as the intelligence agency and the PNP, NBI, so that they can advise us in that matter and help us with the investigation.
And cyber hacking is being looked into as well?
As far as hacking is concerned, of course, they will look into that, but the systems of the EA are not yet digitally connected.
So when do you expect a full report on this? Did you say next week, sir?
The next week, we will have a checkpoint meeting with these investigators, because they asked for a week to do the field work, and we will get their assessment. Of course, we will ask from them when could they submit a final report, and from that we can update you.
So let's talk about the power generators just very quickly, sir. For Terminal 3, it was already said that it can only capacitate 30% of Terminal 3, very different from Terminals 1 and 2, where the genset has a 100% capacity for both those terminals. Why was it that this was not looked into? I ask that because, again, it's a power interruption, as what happened in Jan 1, but it was at the CAAP. Didn't MIAA look into Terminal 3? And didn't you know at any time that the capacity of the genset was just at 30%?
Thank you for that. Actually, we looked into that system already, and we were checking how come NAIA Terminal 3 only has 30% backup power compared to NAIA's Terminal 1, 2, and 4. Of course, NAIA Terminal 3 is bigger, but at the same time, we're checking as to the design, why when the terminal was built, 100% backup power was not provided. So since last year, we're already in the process, of course, of determining how we can procure additional gensets, because we need to know first the capacity that we need to buy, which systems do we need to prioritize in terms of powering as part of the critical load. Because right now, the 30% actually powers the critical facilities, such as, of course, the lights, immigration system, check-in, the boarding bridges. So that's why when May 1 hit, the outage May 1 hit, no international flights were affected, because we did prioritize the immigration process in this case. Unfortunately, there were 24 round-trip domestic flights that were affected from Cebu Pacific, and that's why there is really a need to proceed with this procurement of additional gensets. But apart from that, there are also upgrade programs on the electrical systems of T3. In fact, we've awarded over 100 million pesos in contract to different contractors so that they can change the power cables, the circuit breakers, and do the relay settings so that we can have a more reliable electrical system in T3.
So you said that since last year, you knew that the power generator, the backup was only 30%. If you knew this last year, did the MIAA, through the DOTR, include this in their proposed budget to add more generators for NAIA Terminal 3?
For the NAIA Terminal 3 since last year, we actually were already studying, as I mentioned, what type, what size of generator do we have to install. And now we're in the process of actually either getting it so that in the interim we get it fast. Either we go for a lease for a genset and eventually a purchase of the genset based on the technical specifications that are going to be determined by the technical team.
So it wasn't part of the budget last year that was submitted by the DOTR?
The budget last year that was submitted, of course, the MIAA is a GOCC that has its own budget. So, as I mentioned, there's already 100 million in terms of the power improvement programs because there are a lot of different systems that will need to be addressed. So, have already undergone the technical analysis, have proceeded, and we've awarded these contracts to the contractor. Unfortunately, for the genset, we're just completing the technical study on what size, what type, and where to install it. But we should expect that this will be proceeding in the next few weeks already.
All right, so that you will have a 100% backup soon.
That is the goal.
Okay, MIAA Officer in Charge, Bryan Co. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am, and have a nice day.
You too. Coming up on The Source, experts are seeing a rise in COVID-19 cases as Metro Manila's positivity rate rises to nearly 20%, but the government sees no need for tighter restrictions. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned.